Hello and welcome to Tata Literature Live, the Mumbai International Lit Fest, co-sponsored by Tata Steel and Tata Projects and powered by Godrej. This session is supported by the Consulate General of Switzerland in Mumbai. There will be a short Q&A at the end of the session, so please do send in your questions in the comments section of the platform that you are viewing from. Peter Stamm is an award-winning author and playwright from Switzerland. His best-selling works like Agnes, On a Day Like This, and To the Back of Beyond have been translated into 39 languages. Peter believes in making literature out of ordinary people's lives, and that at their core, human beings speak one common language that transcends all differences. In this session, he will be speaking about his journey and what inspires him as a writer. And now, More Than Words, a straight talk by Peter Stamm.
Okay. Hello. Hi. I'm not a very good speaker, so I'm just reading a text to you, and that's a text I wrote some time ago about my work. And yeah, let's just see and then ask me questions. It's called More Than Words. A man is standing in front of his house on which a sign is attached. House. On the tree hangs a sign that says tree. On the car, one that says car. Everything is labeled, even the cat is wearing a sign. That should make a few things clear, says the man in the cartoon by Gary Larson. The man is alone in the picture. The signs are seemingly addressed only to himself. He is like Adam, the loneliest man in the strange scene from the creation story where language is born, and perhaps literature. Now the Lord had formed out of the ground all the wild animals and all the birds in the sky. He brought them to the man to see what he would name them. And whatever the man called each living creature, that was its name. God created the world, but he has no words for it. He learns from Adam what the animals are called. With an almost childlike curiosity, he has made something, he points to it and wants to know what it is called. And perhaps he repeats the names with the incomparable joy with which children repeat words they have never heard before. Tiger, bear, elephant. The language is Adam's only active contribution to the creation. With it, he creates a virtual parallel world. It is significant that later, when the peoples in Babel threaten to become dangerous for God, he distorts their language. He strikes them with their own weapon. But still Adam is alone in the world. Still nothing indicates that he will not remain alone. So why does he need a language? He cannot have named the animals in order to talk about them. The language is for him a means to appropriate the world, to create order. Thanks to language, like for Gary Larson's sign painter, a few things become clear to him. By naming the animals, Adam perceives them. By reading them, he understands them. Like Adam, every child comprehends the world by learning to speak, by naming things, by calling things by their names. When children begin to speak, they have long since learned to communicate their wants and needs without language. They can make their parents understand that they are thirsty or hungry, that they want to sleep or play. The first words children learn have nothing to do with their needs. They don't ask for water or food. Seemingly at random, they start repeating the names of things. That language is also a means of expressing one's thoughts and feelings is something they learn much later, when they begin to form sentences. We don't talk just to share thoughts or feelings. First and last, language serves us to assure ourselves of the world and of ourselves. Language sharpens our view of the world. Without language, our view of the world would be a diffuse topography of feelings. To put the world into a form means, first of all, to put it into language. I'm convinced that the first cave paintings were created long after the development of language. If you don't have a language, you don't have pictures. Literary works are directions. They do not create the world, they order the world and lead us through landscapes and times, real or fictional. In uncertain terrain, they show us passable ways. Even invented landscapes, which one might assume consist only of the words that they are described with, always refer to the real world, to the author's world of experience, and later to that of the reader. When I write, of an unknown island on whose shore I was washed up. That island is already there in your minds, even before I have told you whether it's in the Arctic Ocean or in the Pacific. The author is never alone on his desert island. The reader is always with him, following his gaze, his path, his words, or even preceding them. My God, if I have ever had one, is the reader who watches over me on all my paths. But this reader is first and foremost myself. By writing, I explain the world to myself. By writing, I accompany myself through my life. And it is not always clear who precedes, I the reader or I the author. If I were to draw the paths I have taken in my life on a map, the result would be an inextricable network of lines. My writing is nothing more than an attempt to read some of these lines, if not their meaning, then their shape or structure. The first and simplest way of reading the world and putting it into a form is, we have seen it, the list. Many authors, especially children's authors, seem fascinated by lists, use them in their books. I once wrote a story that consisted only of a list, the inventory of an accountant looking back on his life, that not only contained the number of socks and ties he possessed, but also the number of times he had been unhappily in love or felt lost and lonesome. The list can be much more than what it contains. To make a list can have many reasons. In the title story of my collection, In Strange Gardens, a list plays a crucial role. A neighbor waters Ruth's flowers during her absence. Once, when she rummages through Ruth's things, with a rather bad conscience, she finds a short list. Next to the birthday cards, there was a crumpled scrap of paper, a list of important items to remember: carpet slippers, contact lens cleaner, nightgown, reading matter. The neighbor pocketed a piece of paper, possibly in order to throw it away, and then she left the room and left the house and locked the door after herself. The neighbor does not throw the list away. When it falls into her hands again later, we only learn that Ruth has been admitted to a clinic, presumably a psychiatric hospital, as she has been many times before. And only now we do learn why the neighbor kept the list. The words reading matter had surprised her and moved her. She didn't understand why. After all, it wasn't as though she were related to Ruth or anything. But she likes reading so much, she said. Her husband didn't even look up from his plate. She felt tears well up in her eyes, and she quickly stood up and carried the empty dishes into the kitchen. The list I mentioned really existed. My girlfriend had written it before our summer vacation. I found it on a pile of paper long after we had returned home and unpacked our suitcases, and I was moved, like the neighbor, by the word reading matter. Maybe because I realized what books really are: food for readers, something we would starve without. It's not about taking one book or another on vacation, reading one story or another. It's not about suspense, romance, self-help, or whatever the headings are under which publishers group their books. Of course, every reader has preferences, but beyond all words and stories, literature fulfills a basic need for a secondary life, as Peter Stamm called it. Living in order to be able to look at life, not observe or explore, just look at it. The art of literary writing is not in word choice or sentence structure. Mastery of language must be assumed in a writer, as mastery of the instrument is in the musician. A literary work becomes compelling through its shape. If the shape fails, then no matter how beautiful the words may be, the work does not satisfy. How often do writers lead us in endless loops through landscapes that could have been traversed by a straight path? What should we write about? A young writer asked me recently. Everything, he said, had already been written. Perhaps I should have told him to start with a list, like Georges Perec, who sat in a cafe in Paris for 3 days and described only what he saw. If you want to read something you don't already know, I should have told the young writer, buy a newspaper. We don't read literature to get news. We read literature to have it confirmed that the world is as it is, that people are as they are, as we are, that we all speak a common language, and that we can understand each other, that our life has a meaning. Good literature is rarely original. great literary figures are men or women without qualities. Madame Bovary, Hans Castorp, Meursault, Green Henry, Jacob von Gunten, Hemingway Old Man, Perec Man Asleep. The question of content is an aesthetic question, not a political or a moral one. There is no imaginable character who would not be suitable as the main character of great literature. Those authors who rely too much on flashy appearances often only conceal inner emptiness. When asked why I write, I have often answered because I like to read. The explanation seemed plausible to me. If you like listening to music, you want to play music. If you like watching soccer games, you want to play soccer. If you like reading, you'll end up writing sooner or later. But at some point I began to doubt this answer. Of course I could only write because I had read a lot. Through reading I learned the techniques of writing. But the drive to write doesn't come from literature, it comes from life. The roots of literature are in the unfathomable depth of reality. I write out of the desire or necessity to counter the beauty and awfulness of the world with something. That's why literature is always about the same questions, because we all ask ourselves the same questions. The fact that we seek answers in stories should not change the fact that stories are only means, not the end. The story, the plot, only serves to give the work a form, a structure, time and space, nothing more. It is no more important than the apples in A Still Life by Cézanne, than the mountains he painted more than 200 times. Not because he didn't know any other mountains, but because it didn't matter which mountain he painted. Nothing against reality in literary work, and nothing against good research. But what makes a story alive is not the content of facts, but the emotional involvement of the author. In his review of Unformed Landscape, my second novel set in the far north of Norway, a journalist wrote, "Many a reader has been heard to rave about the fascinating Nordic landscapes in his book, without actually finding them on the page. For Stamm does not describe such things, he evokes them." It's true the landscapes are not described in detail in the book, but I don't know if I evoke them. One can only evoke what is already there, but few of my readers have ever been to northern Norway. Few have any idea of the landscape. What one feels when reading Unformed Landscape is not the topography of Lapland. It is the feeling of a person who lives in that landscape, moves in it. These feelings become the landscape again in the reader's imagination, an approximate landscape. If one were to ask them to describe it, it would probably be as difficult for them as if one were to ask them to describe their dreams. Maybe that's why readers keep telling me that they read my books in one go. Because I don't try to recreate a world, but because in my stories I depict the movement through that world. And because my descriptions are as fleeting as the observations of a hurried traveler, I do not create a landscape in my writing. I move through landscapes, and in the best case, my reader moves with me. When I was presenting my books in Moscow a few years ago, a young German student and aspiring author came to me after the event. He had read my novel Agnes at the university and asked me a few questions about the book. But above all, he wanted to tell me that I had written a book about him and his girlfriend. His Agnes was, like him, born more than 20 years later than my character. She had spent the first years of her life in Afghanistan and studied Arabic. She led a very different life from my fictional Agnes. The two women share certain character traits, but even more, the strange, somewhat perplexing love of their friends. What had touched the student about my book was not my story, were not my feelings, and certainly not Chicago, the city in which the book takes place. What had touched him were his own feelings, and the fact that someone before him had felt that way and written about it. During my trip to Russia, I also went to Yekaterinburg, a city on the other side of the Urals, almost 2,000 kilometers from east of Moscow. For 26 hours, the train traveled across vast plains through endless birch forests and swamplands. During the few stops, men and women gathered on the platform, offering berries and cucumbers and cut glass for sale, only leaving when the train moved on. Outside, tiny villages passed by, clusters of quaint-looking log cabins. It was slowly getting dark, and I wondered, as I always do at such moments, what it would be to live here. I imagined standing outside on one of the dirt roads. Maybe I had been gardening during the day and was on my way home, stopping briefly to check on the train. Perhaps in the lighted windows I saw the passengers, saw the dining car and a man standing in the open doorway smoking a cigarette. It is in moments like these that my writing begins, moments of doubt, moments in which it is no longer self-evident to me that I am who I am. Then there remains only that which connects us all, that which is between us. I was still standing at the open door of the dining car, which was only secured with a grill. I looked out over the flat land that was slowly disappearing into the twilight. There was an almost full moon in the sky, and I took a few photos, pictures that, as it turned out later, were doubly blurred by the fading light and the movement of the train. Blurry shots in which nothing could be seen of this great country, pictures like memories. I threw the cigarette away and went back to my carriage, to my compartment. Outside it was now completely dark. I closed the shutter and lay down on the narrow bunk. Sometime during the night I awoke. The train had stopped and I opened the shutter and looked out. We were in a train station. The platforms were brightly lit by cold light. No human being was to be seen. I deciphered the name of the city on a sign and looked up the timetable and was reassured. We were only a few minutes late. And I felt the same happiness and satisfaction that I feel when I read good literature, where the writing almost perfectly conveys reality. Yeah, so much to my text. And now, ready for your questions.
That was wonderful, Peter. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We have quite a few questions from our audience.
Very good.
The first one being from Maitrey Shirolkar. At what age did you start writing? Could you please share some tips for budding authors?
I think I started to write seriously. I mean, I started at 6, but to write to learn to write at school. But serious literary writing, I think I started at about maybe 20. So, and I think some of the tips were in the text I've been reading. I mean, I think it's all about being present in your text. It's not about finding a crazy story that nobody has told before. It's more like being in the text and being part of the text and like making a kind of sacrifice to the text. You can't, it's like a text is like a living being. It's not something you just create like a machine or a cake. It's more something, it's part of you. So be in your text, be honest, be, write about what you know about and what touches you, and write about your questions. A friend of mine always said in the beginning of a text there should be a question, and I think that's a good advice. It's not about telling people how they should live, or that they shouldn't eat meat, or that they should I don't know, recycle. It's more like having a question and then finding the answer in the text. Mm-hmm. Of course, people should recycle, but it's not what literature should tell them, I guess.
In fact, there's so much you've said, so many good, so many things that you said in your speech right now that I feel I'm going to go back and watch the YouTube feed, and I'm sure our audiences can do that as well and pick up from that, because it's really lovely. So thank you for that.
You.
Our next question is from Seema. You have worked and studied in so many fields. Which, if any, has been most inspirational for your writing?
Not studying. I think life has been most inspiring. I did. There was when I started to write, there was no education in writing in Switzerland. You couldn't go to university to do creative writing or something. So I just chose to study everything. I mean, I just was curious about the world, and I thought the writer should know as much as he could, and not just studying, but also working in different fields and meeting people and traveling. So, but I mean, of course, there have been authors who haven't traveled, who haven't studied. It's not, you don't have to do that. Each writer has his own career and his own way that he chooses. But for me, it was like, first of all, I was very curious about the world and about almost everything. So yeah,
Yeah,
even
you're an
I
observer
remember
of the world.
when I was 20, I broke my leg, and the first thought I had was, wow, great! Now I go to the hospital and I've never been in a hospital, so it was a new experience to me. The broken leg was not the main thing. It was just knowing a new place and seeing how it worked.
Yeah, your observations of the world around you.
Yeah.
That's lovely. Thank you. Our next question is from Aditya. I'm sorry, just a second. Yeah. Landscape and climate settings feature prominently in your novels. How important are these elements to set the tone of novels, or specifically your novels?
I think to me it's very important to know exactly where we are when I describe or when I write. Even if I don't describe a place, I myself have to see the place in front of my inner eye. So it's not about the specific landscape. It's just the fact that I know exactly where we are and how the sun shines on things and how it smells, and so can be a plain place. I mean, it doesn't have to be an exotic place like northern Norway, but I have to be there. I mean, I absolutely have to feel the place. Mhm.
Right. So it's about how you feel in that moment and in that space.
Yeah, and I remember writing texts and they didn't really work, and then I realized that I didn't know exactly where we were, so I had first to decide on a place, on a time, on an atmosphere, and then I could only write a text, and it became and it worked.
Mhm. That's wonderful. Thank you. Our next question is from Ria. Your novels have characters struggling with their impressions and reality. Do you think that many people have this struggle?
I would guess so, yeah, because I mean, reality is a strange thing. It's, I mean, we all know that it's when you grow up, you think everything is like there is a chair, there is a mother, and there is a cake. But then you realize that things are much more complicated. I mean, the world is different for each of us, and sometimes dreams and imaginations mix with reality, and we're not sure whether what we see is actually what is there, because another person sees a completely different thing in the same place. So it is complicated. It is also fascinating to me. I mean, yeah, I don't have an
Absolutely.
answer in a way. I'm sorry, but it's
No, that
something that
was,
never. Mm.
yeah, that was interesting. Thank you. Our next question is from Harshit. Is literature a welcome escape from reality, or does it help to explain reality? I think it's like a follow-up to the previous question.
Yeah, to me, the second was always the case. I think when I was a child, it was more like an escape. When I read like Jules Verne, the famous French writer, where the trip to the center of the world or into the depths of the oceans, that was more like an escape from a boring in boring times.
Mhm.
But now, to me, literature is a kind of is a means to understand reality and to understand other people. One of my sons just told me a few weeks ago that he thinks about studying psychology, and then I said, if you want to understand something about people, you should study literature, not psychology, because I think in literature we learn about people and about the world.
Mhm. But would you say that, your outlook towards it would change progressively over the years as you progress in your career or as you move
Yeah,
forward?
yeah, I think
Right.
so. I think that the distraction part of reading has for me gone to films. I mean, if I want to be distracted, if I'm bored and don't know what to do, then I watch a film. But if I want to learn something about the world, I go to books. And in a way, it's a much richer experience than just watching
Mm.
films. It's more something it's an active thing, not just like watching a movie and passing
Mm.
time. I
Right.
feel,
That's
I
a
feel,
nice,
yeah.
yeah, that's a nice way of looking at it, actually. Thank you. Um, our next question is, you have lived in several countries. From which do you take most inspiration? And this is sent by Angad. From which country do you take most inspiration?
I spoke about lists, but to be honest, I don't really like to make lists of my favorite places or books, or because it's the richness I like. It's not one top and then the second and the third and the fourth. It's just the fact that I can go to different places and I like them all. But I mean, probably the place that was most important to me was Paris, because I've been there I went there as a 19-year-old for a year and worked there. So that really changed my life, I would say, because I came from a small village to a
Mm.
huge, to me, huge city, and I ate seafood for the first time. I went to the cinema 80 times in a year, and I mean all these experiences that I made
Mm.
probably made me a writer.
Wonderful. Um, Incidentally, I want to go to Paris. Hopefully someday
Oh,
soon.
absolutely, you have to do it.
Joy Bansal has sent us his question. What are the same questions we are all asking? That's a question in a question. What are the same
Yeah,
questions?
yeah.
Hmm.
I think
Okay.
it's the questions of life and death. I mean, it's what is love? What is? That's actually the questions that when you go to Russia, students are not ashamed to ask you. In Switzerland, nobody would ever ask an author about that. But in Russia, people actually ask an author, what is love? What is life? What is death? I mean, that's the big questions, and we were all a bit ashamed to ask them, but they are the basic questions. The fact that we are all going to die, that we will all be dead in 100 years, um, it's not a question, but it's a fact that we have to deal with, and so of course there is the question, what will come after us, and yeah, all this, and
Absolutely.
also does she love me or doesn't she love me?
Oh, did you
It's
ask her?
also yeah, you could ask her, but you could also write a book.
Okay. Girish Bambania is asking, how did you choose the genre that you're currently writing?
I'm not really thinking about genres. I'm just
Okay.
I'm just writing my text, and then it's something. Maybe you know Maurice Sendak, the famous children's author who wrote Where the Wild Things Are.
Hmm.
And they once asked him why he wrote children's books, and he said, "I don't write children's book. I just write books, and then people say they are for children." So it's about the same with me. I just write my books, and then people say it's a novel or it's a short story. But it's not really a genre.
Yeah, you wouldn't like to compartmentalize it
No,
as a
I might
genre.
once write a crime novel. Why not? But I won't say now I'm writing a crime novel. I just write a novel, and then there might be a crime in it, and then it's going to be a crime novel. But yeah,
A crime novel set in a particular space? Or
in
you haven't thought
India.
about that yet? Oh, yes, please.
No, no, I haven't thought about it. No.
All right. Thank you. Our next question is from Preeta. There's a lot of alienation in your books. What has led you to explore this context more than others?
Hmm. I think that I think each author has his or her basic themes, and we don't really know where they come from. Sometimes we do, but sometimes we don't. I don't really know where I've had quite a happy childhood, so I'm not dealing with father issues or mother issues or whatever. I come from a country that's extremely stable, so we don't have big political questions that haunt us. So maybe that's just what rests when everything else is solved. I don't know. I don't know why I write about the things I write about.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually don't want to think too much about it because might might
Yeah. You just
yeah
let
it
it
won't
flow.
yeah it won't help much, I think, to think too much
Mm-hmm.
about yourself.
Right. Thank you. The next question is from Shivani. Do you agree that there are a few basic stories in the world which are then reworked in thousands of interpretations by authors and poets and playwrights?
Yeah, I've read these theories. Uh, I think some people say there are 7 basic stories. Why not? I mean, you can always break down the story to some basic constellation or something. And but does it help when you write? Probably not. But
Hmm.
maybe, yeah, maybe that's the case. I'm not a scholar, so. mm.
Thank you. I hope that answers your question, uh, Shivani. Arun Tangsali has asked us, do you associate names with those you observe, and do those names influence how you think about what they are doing?
I think so, yeah. I know a woman from radio, and she did once a piece about what names do in literary texts, and she asked different authors what is an Agnes or what is Gillian, and so everybody said, well, a Gillian is this and that, and an Agnes is this and that, and so I think names do things in our heads, but they don't do the same things to all the people. I
Mhm.
would, for example, never use the names of my family because they're just somehow occupied by the people I love. But once a person, I have to give a person a name in the beginning because I can't write about a person before she has an or he has a name. So the name is
Mhm.
like giving a name to a child. I mean, you usually give the name to a child before it's born. So
Uh-huh.
you decide this is going to be a Fritz or this is going to be a Hans, and then the name does something to the character. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Mhm.
Our next question is from Jessica. Your work has been translated into a number of languages. What is the art of getting translation to authentically reflect your voice or your words?
Hmm. You would have to ask that my translators, but the only thing I can do is to be kind to them. I mean, they are important to me, so I always offer them to ask me questions, and quite a
Mhm.
few of them do, and somehow I think the most important to me is that they not only are good in writing, but they also understand what my goals are, and also
Mhm.
that they like my texts. I think if you don't like a text, it's very hard to translate it.
Right.
You should be, hmm?
How collaborative is it, and how involved are you generally in the whole process?
Not very collaborative. I mean, I do a fact sheet for each book that I send
Mhm.
to the translators, so they have some basic things. They know citations and places. I send some photos of the
Mhm.
places there in the books. But afterwards, I'm just open to their questions, and I would say maybe about half of them do ask questions. Sometimes it's just one question. Sometimes I have one translator who asks me like dozens of questions with each book. He's very
Mhm.
exact.
Uh-huh.
He's a professor, so
Uh-huh.
he would ask like if they drink a glass of wine, he would ask, is it a glass with a stem or is it just a
Interesting.
plain glass? I don't know. It's funny.
That's interesting because I guess it shows it gives us a feel of how the character would hold the glass and
Maybe, yeah. I my Italian translator once asked me when they drank coffee, is it espresso or is it filter coffee? Because to Italians that makes a huge difference. So
yeah,
it's sometimes it's cultural things that make translation difficult.
absolutely. Right. Thank you. Who are some of the writers who have inspired you? And this question is asked by Sumanti.
I think one of the most important writers to me was Ernest Hemingway, that I read at, I don't know, 18, 17. And he was really a big inspiration to me. And afterwards, tons of writers. I mean, people like, probably philosophically, it's probably Albert Camus, who was the most important to me,
Mhm.
the French philosopher and writer. Cesare Pavese, an Italian writer, was very important to me. Anton Chekhov from Russia. Um, who else? I mean, many. That's just very few of my books that you see in the back. So I have like thousands of books downstairs.
Same here. Those are just a few. I don't have thousands, but
Okay.
certainly more than that.
Have you read all of them? No, you haven't. I haven't.
It's a secret I'm not willing to reveal. But I have read a few of them for sure.
Yeah, me too.
All right, thank you. Our next question is from Geet. Do you have a writing schedule? What works for you? Writing plots or characters first?
I don't. I do. I don't prepare anything. I need a first sentence, and then I just start writing. And I never know where it leads. I don't know what characters I will need during the writing process. So in the beginning, maybe I have two characters, and they sit together and have a coffee, and then they say something and do something, and then maybe I need to add another character. But I don't plan before. I never know where a novel goes. I'm just writing a novel, and in the middle of the novel, I decided to kill the main character. It just died. He just died. I mean, and that was a decision I took like 5 pages before he actually died. I didn't know that in the beginning, and it
Mhm.
made writing really difficult because the whole book is about him. So there was a challenge to deal with him being dead. And
Mhm.
that's part of the fun, to never know where you go. That's why I said you need a question, not a goal.
Right. That's a nice way of looking at it, actually. So you don't have it all plotted in advance. You just let it flow and you see what comes to you naturally as
Yeah,
you
I mean
progress.
it's like trips. I mean, if you go on a trip and you have a it's like a group trip and you know exactly what you will do on each day. Let's say come to Switzerland, and then you get a
Mhm.
plan and they say on Monday you'll be in Lucerne and watch the this and that, and on Tuesday you'll be in Zurich and buy some souvenirs. Let's be honest, that's quite boring. So it would
Yeah.
be much more fun to just fly into Switzerland and then walk out of the airport and see what happens. And then maybe rent a car and just start driving. And then you won't get to Lucerne. Maybe you get to Olten or Winterthur, and then you'll meet people and make experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And you eat Swiss food as compared to probably Indian food if you're traveling with a tour from
Yeah.
India.
And maybe somebody will steal your luggage and then you'll meet someone who helps
Maybe,
you and whatever. Things happen.
hopefully not. I wouldn't
Hopefully not.
recommend that happen to anyone.
No.
Yeah. Keep your passport close to you.
Yes, yeah,
That's
that's
just
important. Whatever you do, keep your passport close.
right. Okay, we just have a few minutes to go and a couple of more questions for you, Peter.
Hmm.
There's a question from Lizanne. Which books, authors, or poets give you most comfort?
Did I most comfort, meaning
Which
what?
uh, give you most comfort, like
Oh, most
like a
comfort.
go-to?
I don't know. Maybe the guy I no, maybe I remember when I was in the army and I didn't like the army. It was quite not it was not cruel, it was just boring. So I always had like poems with me. It's these small. There is a series of books, very small yellow books that you can put in your pocket, and I had the poems by Josef von Eichendorff, famous German romantic poet, because it was a very concentrated form of beauty and of comfort in a way. Yeah.
Okay, that's nice to know.
So
Thank
it's
you.
like medicine. I mean, you can just take one poem 3 times a
Mhm.
day, and then you're fine.
And you're okay. No need for a
Hmm.
doctor.
No.
Okay. We have a question from Vrinda. You first trained in accountancy, which is seen as a reliable, steady profession. What was the reaction of your family and friends when you decided to leave it to go into writing?
I actually became an accountant because I was fed up with school. I didn't want to go to school anymore, and not and so that was the thing you did in my village when you were good. I was good at school, so my family was completely okay with it. My parents were extremely open to every. We were like four children, and they just let us do whatever we wanted. They never criticized my decision. They might ask, "Do you need money? Can you get along?" And I did get along. So yeah, I
Wow.
think
So
my father.
you really did have
Mhm.
a perfect childhood, pretty much.
Yeah, that's maybe that's something I wasn't aware then. But when I get questions like these, I realize that it's not always the case that your parents let you do what you want. I
Right.
think
Absolutely.
my father liked to write and was interested in art and everything. So maybe it was even a kind of satisfaction to him that I did something he wasn't able to do
Mhm.
because his family was just not didn't have enough money to let him go to the university.
Wonderful. Indian parents, if you're listening, take a cue. Take a cue from
Okay.
here. Okay,
Are you speaking about
Peter,
your parents or just general Indian parents?
just general.
Okay.
We have one last question for you.
Okay.
This is from Sean.
Mhm.
You are also a playwright. How different is it to construct a play in the mind?
It's completely different. Yeah, I haven't written plays for a long time now. Um, I was thinking about doing it again, but it's like a different mode, so I would have to completely switch and uh, yeah, it's would be a long discussion to say what exactly is the difference. But I think the main difference is that you have like different points of view. You have different characters in which you. Usually in my novels, I have only one point of view, one. Yeah, but if you write a dialogue, you have to have like different points of view, and
Hmm.
I prefer writing prose because in prose you're like God. I mean, you create your own world, and nobody. I mean, I'm the boss. But if I
Yeah,
write a play, then it'll go to the theater and people will do things with it and maybe do things that I don't like. So
right.
in a way, I prefer writing prose.
So it should just be up to you to kill a character, not them, not
Yeah, but
the
I
theater.
can't direct. I'm not good at that. Just, I don't,
But
I'm not
have you
patient.
ever
I've
have you
done it
tried it?
with a radio play once.
Uh-huh.
And luckily, I had a great team. I mean, everybody was great except me. So what turned out was fine. But I didn't have the patience, and I didn't have the. I don't know. I'm just not a director.
So what language was the radio play in?
That was German. Yeah.
German. Okay.
Mhm.
Lovely. I think that's all our questions. Let me just have a quick look again.
Mhm.
Yes, I think that is all the questions we have. If there are any closing words you would like to tell our viewers, any thoughts to end the session?
Uh, I'm not good at closing words. We spoke about that. Saying goodbye, ending things. I'm just
If
the
this is
novel.
not
I'm just.
goodbye, it is just like we discussed earlier. Uh,
Um,
it's not goodbye. It's a see you later.
okay. Yeah, maybe I see you later. I would love to come to India once, but it's
We would love to have you here.
well, yeah, but it's a long way and it's a big country, so you can't
Right.
just yeah.
So plan a trip and travel all over India and then write a
No,
book.
I won't plan a trip. I'll just come.
Okay,
And I
no,
have
just
an
plan to
elephant.
come.
Did you see the
Oh,
elephant?
yeah.
I have an Indian elephant that was given to me by a friend. Here it is.
Oh, beautiful. That's a
So
really pretty
I
elephant.
have to take him home once to show him where he comes from.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Hmm.
I'm sure he'd like to go home.
Who knows?
Okay. Thank you so much, Peter. This was wonderful. It was so lovely chatting with you, and I'm sure our
Thank
viewers
you.
have enjoyed this conversation as much as I have. Thank you so
Hmm.
much.
Okay. Thank you all. Bye.
So, the drive to write doesn't come from literature, it comes from life. That is something I've picked up and a lot more from this conversation, and I'm sure all of our viewers have had as much fun listening to this. So thank you so much, Peter. Thank you for this wonderfully inspiring session. This session was supported by the Consulate General of Switzerland in Mumbai. Tata Literature Live, co-sponsored by Tata Steel and Tata Projects and powered by Godrej, continues with many more interesting conversations and workshops. Do check out the full schedule on our website. And if you want to spend some time in a bookstore, head on to landmarkexcite.com, our knowledge partner. Thank you.